All right. Well, joining us today is Tim Hale. He has been with us before. If you've been following America's Mom, then you are probably aware of his story. He spent 3 years fighting the federal government, 1 year in jail, 2 years formally in prison due to his role at January 6th. What was his role? Well, he showed up in a suit and tie to listen to President Trump give his last speech at the White House and proceeded to walk the grounds, stroll inside the building, stroll outside the building. And that was that. And now here we are. Tim Hale joins us now on the weaponization of our federal government. What do you think, Tim? Listening to Eric's story, it's just, it's kind of your story all over again. Unbelievable.
Absolutely, Sharana. Thank you for having me back on. Yeah, the situation with the Wolverine Watchmen, the Michigan plot, all that. I mean, there's so many cautionary tales that Americans have kind of glossed over, but they get more and more egregious. And I think that the scale of January 6th proved that it wasn't going to stop with Michigan or any of those things. It's just going to get bigger, it's going to get worse, and they're going to target even more and more of us if we don't bend the knee. No plea deals, never. No plea deals,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
that was powerful. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, it's absolutely correct. You know, when someone takes a and look, let me be perfectly clear. I understand why people might. I understand why people might. It wasn't the path I went down, but I was of the mind that when you give an inch, you take a mile. You know, they take a mile, and that's exactly what happens. Is that when you take these deals, it actually creates case law. It creates a precedent, and this can be used to this can be further weaponized against other people. And so, while we always have our families or our lives to consider, we also need to remember that the pendulum, the the pendulum will always swing back in the other direction, but how quickly that happens is really up to us as a society. And it also, we can't forget that the common law system has a lot of great benefits, but one of the downsides is that once something becomes precedent, it's very hard to reverse it. And so, unfortunately, when you weaponize the legal system even once, it's it's going to take a very long time. It's going to be very hard to fight to reverse those assaults on freedom. So you have to admire
I
the
think it,
conviction of these men.
I, Oh, absolutely. And I think that's one of the reasons that we have you on too. And when we're going over the issues of January 6th, we've got very parallel situations here. You've got Dan Chappell, who literally was the one setting all of these men up. They felt like they were befriended, and then he picks what he thinks are the most vulnerable people and just tells them to recruit, recruit, recruit. Then we look at January 6th, what happened there. We had all these FBI informants, CIA operatives scattered throughout the crowd trying to play on people's emotions. I thought it was interesting when Eric was talking about reminding us it was the era of COVID, when businesses were being forced to shut down, when people were not allowed to see their elderly parents if they were in nursing homes or hospitals. If you went into the hospital, it was over. You just prayed to God they didn't give them resveratrol and that you might see them again. All the ways that they prevented us from living our lives and especially being with our loved ones was massive. So you've got high emotion going on in Michigan, as you did in basically everywhere in the country. And so people are venting. They're talking about their frustrations. They're talking about their concerns. And I can't believe how that was turned on them, how that was used against them, you know, you know,
Yes.
targets.
Well, I mean, and it didn't stop there. You know, I mean, they tried to repeat that inside the D.C. jail with a lot of us. Obviously, D.C. is worse than any blue state when it came to the lockdowns and the COVID policies, and that's what it was like for the first year of solitary in that jail. They dangled the carrot on the stick in front of you. Take the COVID shot, and we'll let you see your family, or we'll let you see your lawyer, or we'll let you have civil rights. But worse than that, it's just they put us under these intense circumstances in order to radicalize us. They believed that if they punished us enough, if they tortured us enough, that we would resort to some sort of extreme behavior, and that didn't end up happening. But we had people planted in there to do just that. Just like with them, they had people in there with us to blend in with us and to pretend to be our friends, and then try to lure us into committing crimes. And I mean, we don't need to get into all the actors, but a couple of them. they're still trying to set up militias right
Mm-hmm.
now, right in an election year, to to set people up. So I mean, unfortunately, this is a weird intersection between January 6th and the Michigan thing, is that they're actually doing the exact they're using January 6th defendants to start militias to entrap people to sabotage the next election. It never stops. Unfortunately, this is the machinations of the deep state, if you want to call it that. They never end, and unfortunately, if I fear if this election is stolen again, then we're never going to clear out the hostile actors within the DOJ, the DHS, and all these other agencies and departments that essentially only exist to entrap a third of the population. So it's stop now. It's got to stop now.
To to kind of bring out the story of Adam and how he was lured in. I'm curious how do you avoid being entrapped? If you're venting, If you're venting or you're frustrated about something and someone seems to come along and have the same kind of thoughts about that, or you share different, or excuse me, you share similar, hobbies, or you live in the same area, how is it possible that that becomes a tool of entrapment where they're building a false relationship like you experienced in the prison also, what's happening with this man Adam, and then Adam with his relationships with other people, he's just inviting them into this completely unaware that he's being set up. How is this happening? How is this happening?
Normal, I'd say normies, right? The average person wouldn't know what to look for typically, but I think as time goes on, we need to really drive home to people that it might seem un-American, and it is, but today you really got to watch out what you say, and to everybody. The truth is that, and I learned this. My roommate turned me in. With January 6th, most of most of us were turned in by family members or coworkers and stuff like that. We're at a point in our society where we're like, it reminds me of some of the worst despotic regimes in history, where people were turning in their loved ones to the state. Everybody was an informant. Basically, everybody was an informant against somebody else, and that's where we're headed towards. So people need to realize that there are certain things that feds would say to try to entrap citizens. There are certain things. I mean, on the internet we call it Fed posting. Hey, fellow patriots, maybe we should do such and such. I mean, and that's what they do, and they dedicate countless amounts of resources and money to doing this. All you need to do is just look at a little case law, and you'll realize that the feds entrap people nonstop. And so Americans need to start waking up. It's very likely that if someone comes up to you and he has all the same exact opinions as you, and he's trying to encourage you to break the law, and he's trying to encourage you to engage in extreme behavior against political or legal entities, it's probably a Fed. He's probably a Fed. And it's easy I understand, like a lot of those guys were taken advantage of. They tried to do the same thing to us, and they try to do the same thing to a lot of people. They prey on people's emotions. But especially as patriots, when we're in the minority as it is in terms of having institutional power, we need to be very cognizant of the fact that those who control the levers of power do not want to give them up, and they will do everything they can to make us look like radicals and terrorists. And we have to be very self-aware. We need to have a lot of situational awareness, because it's only going to get worse. If someone's saying something that sounds sketchy, it probably is.
Right. Yeah. Trust your gut on that. Trust your gut on that. When you were in the jail, you realized what was it that made you realize that this was happening, that there was an entrapment effort going.
Well, besides walking up on some of these guys and them not realizing, like them accidentally admitting stuff, not realizing you were there. I mean, one of the guys I was in there with, Tom Civic, he was trying to get me to endorse another Oklahoma City bombing. You had, and which is something actually that the feds were arguing, that I was basically the next McVeigh during my magistrate's bond hearing, because they said I had a copy of the Turner diaries, and that inspired the Oklahoma City bombing. So they tried to set me up with that. It didn't work. But I mean, you had other guys like Troy Smocks who were trying to get us to talk about assassinating politicians. This was very common inside the D.C. jail. You had elements in there who were constantly trying to sabotage people and set them up. You're in a jail, so why is somebody like Jake Lang telling you to join a militia to violently overthrow the government? I mean, he's already in someone's paperwork, a guy named Christopher Finney, and now they have that napalm militia thing going on right now during an election year. It's very sketchy. It's very obvious. But, in hindsight, a lot of people didn't see it back then. It took them a long time to really get with the program. There are people planted in there who are trying to get us to say certain things or to agree to engage in certain behavior or even sign documents. As insane as it sounds, you had the Oath Keepers being charged with seditious conspiracy. So what did someone try to get them to do? Sign a document agreeing that they were proud seditionists. And so, it might sound absurd or bizarre to people on the outside, but that is literally what they will do. And keep in mind, it's not just feds as in agents. You have cooperating assets, junkies, idiots who basically get wrapped up in stuff and they get turned out to do their dirty work. So not everybody who's trying to set people up is going to be an experienced field agent. Sometimes it's just going to be some desperate loser who's trying to get out of their own trouble by getting you in trouble. So you can't have any specific bar set for what exactly entrapment looks like, because there's a lot of dirty people that the feds will plant people inside your jail cell as a cellmate. Perkins informants. They'll plant people inside of jails and prisons just so they can overhear your conversations. And so, I mean, it doesn't end even after they catch you. It doesn't. It doesn't end in jail. It doesn't end in prison. There are certain rules that people can get time off of their prison sentence. They have up to a year in federal time. They have up to a year to get information to get a reduction in their sentence after they've already gone to prison. So snitching, informing, and trapping, it doesn't just end in the courtroom. It continues on. People need to be aware of this. The whole justice system incentivizes sabotaging other people, unfortunately.
That is insane.
That is insane.
Really, that is
that is what's been going on. The problem to me, I guess I'm realizing as you're saying this is it's gone from the prison
now, though,
to the public now.
I never imagined.
I never imagined all these people who aren't doing bad things. They're not seeking to break the law. They back the blue. They're good patriots. They're literally being targeted by the federal government, by a regime. I mean, if you could sum it up in our last few moments here, sum it up for the American people. Why are they doing this?
Conservatives are the easiest people to entrap, I think, because as conservatives they trust institutions. They're traditionalists. They trust the institutions of power. They trust the culture. They trust those things that have existed for so long. So they trust the military and they trust law enforcement almost inherently. And so it's easy. It's hard for them to conceptualize that these institutions that they trust so much would be weaponized against them to further control the system. And unfortunately that's what we have to grapple with. We can't just trust everybody who's in a uniform, unfortunately. And I've worn a uniform.
It is unfortunate.
It is unfortunate, and thank you for your service on that point too. It is unfortunate. It is where we're at right now.
We'll be keeping the conversations going.
There's a lot more people who've been the target of a weaponized government. It's not going to end anytime today. Tim Hale, thank you so much with Patriot Freedom Project and the tremendous work you guys are doing. These stories have to be told. There has to be a historical account. There has to be a documenting of exactly what this government has done to innocent American citizens. And we aim to do it here on America's Mom. Remember, all that is necessary for evil to prevail is for good men and women like you
to do absolutely nothing.
See you back here next week. See you back here next week.